Sports. Today I'm going to be doing some football. I know it's pretty early, but I want to talk about fantasy football. I'm just looking forward to it. I just finished watching the show Receiver, which is a big reason behind why I want to record this. I tried to watch the show Quarterback, but it wasn't as interesting as Receiver to me. I also, not that receivers are a more interesting position because both are extremely important, but I liked the people that were in receiver a lot more than I liked the people that were in quarterback. Not that Mahomes and Kirk aren't, interesting, and who I forget the third, but I mean Justin Jefferson, Deebo Samuel, and Devontae Adams, some of the best wide receivers, and they all had their own drama this year, so that was fun to watch. But I'm gonna go through like the top couple players I'm looking towards, like the first round. I guess is what I'm looking towards, is what I expect the first round to look like. I'm excited for next year. I think next year is going to be a big difference in what happened last year. A lot of changes again. I feel like it's the same year. Always wide receivers and running backs changing up in the first round, and situations get better, situations get worse. So I'm excited and I'm looking forward to it. But I feel like everyone knows the number one pick, regardless of what. Depending actually, PPR. Still PPR. I mean, it's Christian McCaffrey. I mean, he recorded the most fantasy points per game last year at 24 and a half, and the third most fantasy points overall as a running back. He obviously was one of the best running backs in the league, the best running back in the league. The 49ers are going to continue to be an explosive offense after last year. They didn't really lose anyone, and Purdy had a solid year under his belt now, and he's only going to get better. And I think the biggest thing about Christian McCaffrey is that it seems like he only continues to get better. I mean, last year he had a total of 21 touchdowns and a little under 2,000 yards, or a little above 2,000 yards. I can't remember. But just statistically, I mean, Christian McCaffrey is the best running back in the league, and for fantasy, I mean, he's been the best in every, pretty much almost every year since that one breakout year in Carolina. So there's not much to talk about other than he's going to be the top board pick. I mean, he's clearly the best fantasy player, most reliable fantasy player, barring injury, and one of the best offenses, if not the top two offense in the league right now, with a solid running back and a solid offensive line and a solid running plan. So I'm excited to see that. Number two, I had a lot of problems with, just because both situations are difficult. Not difficult, but it depends on what you want to look for more. I mean, CeeDee Lamb finished ahead of Tyreek Hill barely last year, but I put Tyreek at number two over CeeDee. But CeeDee, obviously, it's going to probably be more of a heavy passing offense with no Tony Pollard, regardless of how bad he played last year, Pollard. And it's hard for me to say which one is going to go which, because obviously CeeDee, had 1,700 yards and 12 touchdowns and 2 rushing touchdowns and turned it on in the back half of the year. But I truthfully think that Tyreek Hill is been so consistent in his 2 years with the Dolphins, and he's obviously entering his third year after another big year. He averaged 10 targets, 23.5 fantasy points. He was only one of 8 players who had at least 90 receptions and 1,200 yards. He's still young. He's only 30 years old. He clearly is trending upwards in terms of yardage. Past 2 years, he led the league in yards 2 years ago, and then last year he was very close to doing it. If not, he did it. I believe he actually did it again last year. But yeah, I mean, they thought he was on pace to get 2,000 yards. And the thing about Tyreek is his big playability. Not that CeeDee Lamb doesn't have that, but I always look in the fact that Tyreek Hill can win you a week. Just like, not that CeeDee Lamb can't, but I mean, Tyreek Hill would have 40-point weeks, and I always thought that was extremely important. The fantasy points for both of them were like neck and neck. It was only like maybe a 15-point difference, and CeeDee really turned it on in the playoffs, obviously, but Tyreek Hill would have got you there. And I think Tyreek Hill missed a game, if I'm pretty confident, or went out in a game. But yeah, I'm going to go with Tyreek at number 2, and I'm pretty consistent with that. I'm going to go CeeDee at 3. I mean, he had the entire fantasy football in shock when he turned it on this year. I mean, I don't think anyone expected CeeDee to be bad by any means, but I don't think anyone expected CeeDee to be as good as he was. He surpassed 25 points in 8 games, and like I said, he really dominated the second half of the season. He started slow, which is pretty funny, because that's kind of how his career started every season. It's been slow, and then he had 313.6 fantasy points over the final 11 weeks alone, and prior to that he had 90. And I think that's what I was saying in terms of Tyreek is more consistent, and CeeDee kind of started off slow. Obviously, the Cowboys have this high offense, and regardless of how good their defense is, Dak Prescott's always throwing the ball. So, a lot of people can make the case that he could go 2 over Tyreek, but I think I'd want Tyreek in that Dolphins offense with the way they play, with the way they throw the deep ball, with the coach they have compared to CeeDee Lamb and the Cowboys, who seem to have taken a step back in terms of where their team is going to be from last year. And I don't think the Dolphins have taken a step back. If anything, they've taken a step forward to be a better team. So that's what I'm looking for in my 2-3 spots. And then for 4, I'm putting. It's hard. I want to put Breece Hall above Bijan Robinson, but I really think Bijan Robinson is going to be a big step up. I think Kirk Cousins really adds a lot of value to a lot of players in fantasy. I mean, I remember when I drafted Justin Jefferson his first rookie year, and I remember just thinking like, oh, I remember he was the first round draft pick, and I remember thinking of all the stuff that he had done in college, and it had nothing to do with really other than the fact that I was just like, he's going to Kirk Cousins, and Kirk Cousins is really good at making a certain player like a star. I always felt like when I had Kirk Cousins when he was on Washington, he made players special for just a year, and I thought that's what was going to happen with him. And so I think Bijan and Drake London could be 2 players who, just because of Kirk Cousins' addition, regardless of how the foot goes, can be a big player. So I have Bijan Robinson at 4. Obviously, his rookie season was a little mixed up. He did finish with almost 1,500 total yards, and he did have 8 touchdowns. And I think he could have been better. I think it felt underwhelming considering his prominence and where he was drafted and how much people expected him to do. But I mean, he finished 5th among running backs in snaps, 6th in yards, and 9th in fantasy points. Obviously, like I had said, with the addition of Kirk Cousins and the removal of Arthur, I forget what his name, the head coach, who was kind of a head case when it came to Bijan. I remember Bijan was caught vaping on the bus, and that's why he got benched for the first half of the game. So, I think with the run-heavy offense, with the new coach, Zach Robinson, and especially what they'll do when it comes to the red zone, a little less on Tyler Algier. I don't think he'll be as important this year, given that last year he obviously was, but I just see them using their first-round pick way more than they did last year. I mean, and in the time frame that he had, I mean, he still put up 250 fantasy points over 16 games, which isn't bad by any means from any running back. But I'm excited for him, especially with Kirk Cousins, and I think if I could have if I could have a 4 to 6 spot, and I have any of those spots, right, and given CeeDee, Tyreek, and Christian are off the board, I think I'm taking Bijan in any of those spots, regardless of who's on the board. And then for my number 5 spot, I have Breece Hall. He appeared to be fully recovered from the ACL tear by the end of the 2023 season, and he was one of the very few bright spots when it came to the Jets offense. He averaged 20 and a half touches and 20.2 fantasy points over the final 13 games. Obviously, the Jets ranked, 29th in run block win rate and 30th, I think it was 30th in total points scored. I think if he stays healthy for the entire 2024 season, as well as Aaron Rodgers, I think fantasy managers should be, pretty consistent with drafting him, 2nd or 3rd to Bijan or McCaffrey. I think Bijan and him are kind of interchangeable because they're both young. And I think Breece Hall will get the more bulk of the carries. I think Breece Hall is more, if you want to go for a safer pick in terms of like who I think will be more consistent or who will definitely get the touches in the red zone, get the touches in general, I think that's Breece Hall. But I think Bijan has unlimited upside. That's why I would just select Bijan Robinson over him. But given that offense this year is going to be great, and there's only more and more trade rumors of them getting Devontae Adams. So, with the addition of Mike Williams and the addition of Tyron Smith, I'm sure Breece Hall is going to be running wild behind there. And then for the 6, I had a lot of trouble with putting Ja'Marr Chase just because obviously Joe Burrow's coming off an injury and I don't know when he's going to start, but also when he does start, I mean, Ja'Marr Chase is, still in his 4th season, and last year he still played extremely good with no Joe Burrow. He was the wide receiver 3 last year, even though down the stretch he kind of, wound up getting a little rough. He had a 52.2 performance against the Cardinals in week 5. And I think he's definitely a top 5 player in terms of fantasy. I think it's just hard to undervalue the 3 running backs that I put in the top 5. And I'm excited by all means to see where he goes. And I think the reason I put him above Justin Jefferson at this point is because he does have Joe Burrow. And that's the reason I kind of put Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb above Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson, by all means, I mean, he came back, he played 10 games, he had 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns, but it's a rough time period for Justin Jefferson. He missed a lot of games last year, and he's going into an offense with a rookie quarterback, and obviously he had Kirk Cousins, Nick Mullins, Joshua Dobbs, Jaron Hall, and he still got it done. But I'm not sure if J.J. McCarthy is going to be able to get it done. I know Kevin McConnell's a great game manager. I mean, a game planner, and a great when it comes to high passing offense. But it's just QB proof. Like, that's the problem with him. It just depends on the quarterback. But I have Ja'Marr Chase at number 6. I think he's definitely a top 6 player in terms of wherever you want to draft him. Obviously, certain players love wide receivers and love their team. But he's had 29 touchdowns in his career. He's one of the league's best players when it comes to scoring touchdowns and having big games. So I'm taking Ja'Marr at 6 with a healthy Joe Burrow and a T. Higgins on the fringe and no more Tyler Boyd. And then for number 7, I do have Justin Jefferson. Obviously, he enters his 5th season. Like I said, he missed a lot of games last year. He still had 24 points per game. Was only one of 4 wide receivers to have 6 games of 23 points in the 2023 season. But with what I said, J.J. McCarthy, can he get it done under center? And I think that's the biggest question mark. I think he's one of, if not the only wide receiver that can get it done with a rookie quarterback. And I'm sure J.J. McCarthy will be more of a game manager. And if anything, he kind of just replaces Kirk Cousins in the role of throwing the ball to Justin Jefferson. So I'm excited to see that. And I'm hoping Justin Jefferson has a really good year, because I've always loved Justin Jefferson since he came in his rookie year. And then finally, to finish it up, at number 8, I was going through the motions with whether or not Garrett Wilson with a healthy Aaron Rodgers, or Amon-Ra with the season he had last year, or any of these players. But I think Amon-Ra takes the number 8. He just signed a big contract. He obviously is the leader of the Lions receiving corps, who has gotten better every year, right? And I don't see a reason for him to stop getting better. He had 1,500 yards and 10 touchdowns last year. He was in an offense that, if not going to be better than last year's, is going to get more and more developmental this year with a new, obviously, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs. They had a whole new kind of plan last year, and there's a lot that changed. And I don't think he's showing any signs of slowing down in terms of his progression. I think at this point, the only thing that holds him back is if Jameson Robinson has a big breakout year and he winds up maybe taking it becomes more of a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 instead of a 1A. Or like a 1A, 1B instead of a split in terms of T. Higgins and him. Where Ja'Marr Chase still has a great year, but T. Higgins has a great year, and it kind of takes a little bit away from Ja'Marr Chase. That's always what I compared it to, because when I had T. Higgins, all I ever thought about was man, if Ja'Marr Chase wasn't here, T. Higgins would be going crazy. But yeah, I think Amon-Ra stays pretty at the 8th, in a weaker division, with the Vikings not going to be doing that good this year. And you can argue Green Bay is going to be good this year, but how good are they going to be? And the Bears are the Bears still, regardless of how good they got. They're still the Bears. But I'm excited to see what he can do, and I think it's going to be something that is, again, dependent on whether or not the contract affected him, because I know with players sometimes when it comes to getting the contract, at times it takes a year back, and I've been always saying you got to draft players on a contract year. That's what I did with Lamar. I've done that before. I did it with Antonio Brown the season before he went crazy. But yeah, I always think that's important. And then to finish off the first round, Garrett Wilson at 9. I have Puka Nacua at 10. I think Puka Nacua is a hard one because, is he going to replace, is he going to have the same success as last year, and where did Cooper Kupp fall? But that's all, figuring it out. A.J. Brown at 11 and Jonathan Taylor to finish the first round. But I think with Jonathan Taylor, it could be Jonathan Taylor, Saquon, or Jahmyr Gibbs, depending on who you like and what you think is going to be good. But I think Jonathan Taylor is still one of the best running backs in the league, especially with Anthony Richardson coming back. And he also played really good last year. He played pretty much no games. He had 750 yards and 7 touchdowns, 8 total if you count, this one solo receiving yards. But I don't see a reason why he wouldn't be any good. But I think the hard thing with Saquon for me and the hard thing for Jahmyr Gibbs is, again, they're splitting. I think Saquon's going to have to split those goal line touches with Jalen Hurts, and I think Jahmyr Gibbs is, again, going to have to split goal line touches with David Montgomery. But I don't think Anthony Richardson's going to be running in too many over Jonathan Taylor. I don't think it's going to be one of those things. And then I think Lamar Jackson should be also in the first round, but we won't talk about that. I hope you appreciated this video. I've been looking forward to the fantasy season for a while now. It's only getting a month and month and a couple weeks before the you got to do the draft, or like a month and a week or so. So I'm excited to see what the season wraps up before like it's go time into turning into your draft. Like always, I appreciate you guys watching, and tune in next week. Thank you.